Welcome back to my podcast. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. What do you think the chances are that you'll hire a team of 5 or 10 people and all of them will have the same core values, the same belief systems and skills, and agree to everything? I haven't seen that happen in my 35 plus years of dealing with domestic and international corporations, from billion-dollar companies to mom-and-pop restaurants. Just doesn't happen. We're going to talk about that and groupthink coming up next. Most often, leadership mistakes silence for agreement. Generally, a lack of interpersonal communication leads to either outright fear or lack of trust, or in the worst case scenario, both. As a consultant, my job was to dig and find the root causes that led to group thinking versus synergy. That's a multifaceted project. It's tedious and time-consuming, primarily because you start with a dysfunctional culture. And why? Most assessments pointed to a lack of interpersonal communication between leadership and subordinates, and little to no communication between employees. Various issues arise from such an assessment, but from my experience, until you solve the communication problem, it is difficult, if not impossible, to cope with other cultural changes because communication is the basis for building trust in any culture. I bet you've noticed that some organizations or departments or teams you've worked with have little to no communication from the top down. Okay, you know what happens. You might have the problem right now. I see it all the time. I don't even have to talk to leaders. I can sense it from observing employees' behaviors while doing the job. After 35 years of noticing behaviors and then validating those behaviors with assessments and interviews, you quickly recognize some basic and consistent patterns leading to things like groupthink. Every project I started began with interpersonal communication problems and a lack of trust. Before I could work on connecting leadership and subordinates or even building high-performance teams that use people from different departments to solve overall organizational issues like supply chain management, I had to solve the lack of communication and trust first. All through your education, you were taught a language. Like English, you learn sentence structure, punctuation, spelling, phrasing, and other things about good grammar. But you were most likely not taught communication. Well, maybe speech in high school. You didn't learn how to create a message, the issue with delivering a message, or the fact that the meaning of your message resides in the receiver's mind. In the comments, you can let me know if you're one of those rare people who receive communication training in K through 12 schooling. Yet, we wonder why employees are dissatisfied with their jobs. Sometimes it is essentials like money. Most of the time, it is more complex than money. It might be mistreatment or even abuse. As I probe organizations, it inevitably leads to a lack of trust, and that is because there is no quality interpersonal communication between leaders and employees. In Psychology Today, they best describe groupthink. They say, quote, "Groupthink is a phenomena that occurs when a group of people, well-intentioned, makes an irrational or non-optimal decision spurred by the urge to conform or the belief that dissent is impossible." Groupthink is driven more by individuals than the group. I've trained and created hundreds of high-performance teams at every level within an organization. I've yet to run into a leaderless team, that being a team where everyone is considered equal. They may be out there, but none were leaderless in the hundreds of groups I worked to improve. Even when the team was newly formed and defining leadership and roles, there was at least an informal group leader in the beginning. Leadership sets the tone for how groups think and behave. What causes disconnects between team members and leadership is a lack of interpersonal communication, most often due to the leader's behavior. That disconnection or connection creates that team's cultures, norms, and behaviors. So, one interesting phrase in the Psychology Today description of groupthink is spurred by the urge to conform. Through interpersonal communication, the leader often signals that urge, either good, like reinforcement, or a threat based on a positional leadership power and the use of fear. One way to overcome groupthink and move behavior towards synergy, where the group comes up with decisions better than any one member or even a majority of the members can develop, is an exercise that separates the team from the leadership. I facilitate the team as a group without the leader's presence to answer three basic questions. First, what do you like about your leader? Second, what do you dislike about your leader? And thirdly, what would you like to see your leader do differently? I asked the leader the same three questions, but focused on his team during this time. I asked them to work on their answers to the question while I facilitate the subordinate group. Often the leader is answering these three questions alone. The team has to discuss the question and arrive at a consensus they all agree to before presenting their responses to the leader, but they have to elect someone to make the presentation to the leader. I don't recommend the leader do this exercise. You won't get the same responses. Third-party intervention allows for honest feedback and control of the feedback process. There are specific rules for sharing information, also monitored by me as a third-party consultant. This exercise balances the potential for harm between the leadership and the subordinate. It puts them on an equal playing field. If you want a teeter-totter, they're balanced. One doesn't have any control over the other. The balance of injury is critical to developing trust. When you establish trust, there is no fear of conforming. Trust also alleviates the part of today's Psychology Today's articles, the phrase which was the belief that dissent is impossible. This simple exercise is one of the most powerful tools for creating a solid and trusting interpersonal relationship through effective communication. After the processing of this exercise, I see synergy emerge in teams. Of course, a few other assessments and activities help the team define preferred team roles and determine if there are enough diverse members to maximize synergy and deliver quality product that the team will commit to achieving. Without building trust through effective communication, you can't optimize the other exercises. So let me summarize a few key points that are helpful for you here. If your organization or team feels a need to conform or finds it impossible to dissent, you most likely have an interpersonal communication problem between leadership and subordinates. Leadership sets the organization's culture, their belief system, and their behaviors. Whatever the organization might be, if peer pressure is causing the conformity or fear of dissent, then the leadership is not communicating effectively with the organization and within the organization. Trust is each party's ability to harm the other party. Trust will dissipate when the capacity for harm is unbalanced in favor of one party. The closer you can come to balancing harm between the parties, the greater the chance for trust. All interaction begins with interpersonal communication. Both internal and external barriers can disrupt interpersonal communication. When you disrupt interpersonal communication, people will fill the void. More often than not, that void will be fear or the need to conform. Conformity and anxiety often cause things like hesitancy to act, or fear of speaking the truth, or fear of job security, and many other factors that harm an organization's performance. People often believe that groupthink is a function of everyone thinking and feeling the same way. That would reflect intense similarities. A leader may unduly influence people to think the same way despite facts to the contrary. Groupthink could effortlessly end up as a cult. In this situation, the leader has established a robust interpersonal communication bond with their followers, like Trump's followers. In this case, it is a matter of the leader having their moral, cultural beliefs while having strong interpersonal communication skills. Until the leader is discredited in their followers' minds, groupthink is rewarded, and followers won't alter their behavior until something drastic convinces them they are a victim of groupthink. When this happens, interpersonal communication turns into brainwashing. Few development activities will change a cult environment. It usually destroys itself internally before people see the truth. Most organizations can overcome group thinking with training and development that enhances interpersonal communication. Effective interpersonal communication, coupled with the correct core values and belief systems, can build trust and move groupthink towards synergy. I'm Victor Vogel, and as always, my opinions are my own and don't represent any other person or entity. Until the next time, I encourage you to consider subscribing to my channel when subscriptions become available. As a subscriber, you will receive my 40-minute presentation, Building Trust Through Effective Communication. That's going to be very helpful for you. You can also join us twice a month as a subscriber to my private question and answer sessions. They'll all be scheduled on my Facebook page. Keep in mind, groupthink isn't just about everyone thinking the same way. Often, groupthink is a product of ineffective leadership, and you can change groupthink.